The high-intensity field exercise was reaching its breaking point under the scorching afternoon sun. A specialized tactical team moved through the dust-choked valley, their movements calculated and fast. In the rear, a quiet woman struggled with heavy ammo crates. Elena Cross was the designated logistics support, a nobody in a world of elite operators. Nobody looked at her. They just expected the bullets to be there when needed. But when a critical maneuver went wrong and a lead shooter was forced out of position, a desperate command echoed through the smoke. "Hand me that rifle." Elena stepped forward, and in seconds, everything changed. History unfolding. Elena Cross was 28 years old, and in the high-octane, adrenaline-fueled world of the Advanced Tactical Training Center, she was essentially a background character. She worked in the logistics and supply wing, a department that most elite operators only acknowledged when their ruggedized magazines were empty or their thermal optics ran out of battery during a midnight trek. Elena wore standard-issue tactical trousers and a simple olive-drab shirt with no unit patches, no rank insignia, and no recorded history. Her hair was always pulled back into a functional, severe bun, and her expression was a permanent mask of quiet, professional focus. The training base was a sprawling expanse of red dust and jagged rock, a place where the air felt like a physical weight pressing against the lungs. The heat waves shimmered off the metal containers, distorting the horizon into a blurry, shifting mirage. To the Navy SEALs and Army Rangers participating in the live-fire maneuvers, Elena was simply the ammo girl. In their hyper-masculine world, social value was measured by the physical weight of your rifle, the scars on your forearms, and the number of high-pressure breach-and-clear drills you had mastered in the mud. They saw her as a manual laborer, someone who understood weight distribution and supply manifests, but wouldn't know the difference between a high-pressure flanking maneuver and a simple paper cut. She spent her long hours hauling green steel crates, those heavy sarcophagi of potential energy, and organizing the distribution of 5.56 and 7.62 rounds in the blistering heat. While the operators practiced their explosive entries and tactical retreats, Elena moved with a rhythmic efficiency that was entirely ignored. She was the air they breathed, vital but invisible. To them, she was just another piece of logistics machinery, a living extension of the supply truck. Earlier that morning, a team sergeant named Miller had brushed past her near the supply truck, his gear clinking with every metallic step. He hadn't even looked at her face as he reached for a fresh crate of suppressive rounds. "Hey, logistics," Miller had said, his voice deep and filled with the casual arrogance of a man who lived for the fight. "Make sure the speed loaders are prepped and the magazines are topped off for the 1400 drill. We don't want the actual shooters waiting around while the support staff catches their breath in the shade." Elena hadn't flinched at the condescending tone. She hadn't argued or tried to explain that she was currently managing a complex supply chain for 3 different squads simultaneously while calculating the atmospheric variables for their long-range specialists. She simply gave a small, unbothered nod, her eyes scanning the horizon. "The crates will be at the secondary waypoint, Sergeant Miller. Just make sure your team keeps their spacing in the high grass zone. The shadows there can be deceptive." Miller had already turned away, laughing with his squad mates about a training jump they had completed the night before. To them, Elena's advice was just background noise, technical jargon from a woman who read too many manuals. They didn't see the way she analyzed the tilt of their shoulders or the way she measured the microseconds in their reaction times as they practiced their draws. In the rigid hierarchy of the military, roles often define your value in the eyes of others. If you are support, you are the engine room, invisible as long as things work perfectly, and ignored as long as there is ammo to burn. Elena lived in that shadow without a single word of complaint. She spent her days in the dust, ensuring that the warriors had everything they needed to be heroic. She was the silent architect of their readiness. She was overlooked not because she was incapable, but because she chose to be the silent foundation. She had learned long ago in places far more dangerous than this training ground that in the world of true professionals, the loudest voice in the room is often the first one to panic when the plan falls apart. Elena preferred the silence. It allowed her to listen to the rhythm of the field. It allowed her to see the tactical gaps, that the overconfident missed because they were too busy looking through their optics. As the heavy drill began, she took her position at the secondary waypoint, her boots sinking into the dry sand. Several operators brushed past her, their heavy gear clinking as they moved toward the starting line. None of them acknowledged her presence. She was just part of the landscape, moving in the shadow of the elite, or so they had convinced themselves. If you think people are often limited by how others define their role, comment, "That is unfair." The afternoon sun was relentless, turning the valley floor into a shimmering heat trap that sucked the moisture out of every breath. The simulation was titled the Delta Cross, a high-coordination, live-fire maneuver involving synchronized movement between two fire teams under simulated hostile pressure. It required precise timing, absolute trust, and a constant, unwavering flow of communication. The mock insurgents were controlled by a state-of-the-art AI system that adapted to the team's tactics in real time. It was designed to find the fracture in their focus and exploit it with digital ruthlessness. The sound of simulated sirens and distant mortar blasts added to the sensory overload. Initially, the team was perfect. Miller led the Alpha squad through the first perimeter with a fluidity that was impressive to watch. They cleared the first set of pop-up targets in under 3 minutes, the rhythmic pop-pop of the rifles echoing off the canyon walls in a steady cadence. Elena stood 20 yards back at the rally point, holding a fresh crate, her green eyes scanning the team's formation with a clinical detachment that no one noticed. But then, the heat and the unpredictable terrain began to take their toll. A mistake happened during the rapid transition to the third phase of the drill. One of the Alpha shooters, a junior operator named Jax, slipped on a patch of loose gravel while moving toward a designated cover point. It wasn't a serious injury, but the sudden shock was enough to knock him out of the tactical rhythm. He scrambled to regain his footing, his heavy vest shifting, and his rifle snagged on a low, jagged branch. A 5-second gap opened in the Alpha squad's line of fire. In the Delta Cross, a 5-second gap is an eternity that can lead to a total collapse. The Bravo squad, expecting Alpha to hold the left flank sector, moved out into the clearing as planned. But the sector wasn't clear. The mock enemy targets popped up from the brush, and Bravo was suddenly exposed from an angle they weren't guarding. The AI, sensing the hesitation, ramped up the pressure, triggering secondary targets in the high ground. The Sergeant Miller saw the collapse happening in real time. He shouted through his comms, but the noise of the simulated explosions and the roar of the wind was drowning him out. The communication lag was becoming a death sentence for the drill. He looked back over his shoulder, desperate for a solution to plug the hole before the instructors called a mission failure and stripped them of their ranking. "Jax, get up! Cover the left flank!" Miller roared. But Jax was still struggling with his caught sling, his face a mask of frustration and panic. The rhythm of the exercise was broken. The team was sputtering like a failing engine. They were losing the initiative. Miller realized he needed a body in that position. Now, he looked around the field, his eyes landing on the nearest person. The ammo girl standing quietly by the green crate. "Logistics! Hand me that rifle!" Miller barked, gesturing frantically toward Jax's drop backup weapon. He didn't want Elena to shoot. He didn't even think she knew which end the bullets came out of. He just wanted someone to pass him the weapon so he could attempt to cover both sectors himself in a display of heroic multitasking. It was a desperate, illogical command born of the heat and the frustration of a failing drill. The other operators who were watching from the sidelines froze for a heartbeat. They saw the ammo girl looking at the black rifle lying in the dirt. They expected her to fumble. They expected her to be terrified by the noise and the smoke. They expected her to be the weak link that finally snapped the chain of the elite squad. Elena didn't hesitate. She didn't look for permission or ask for an explanation. She didn't even blink. In one fluid, terrifyingly fast motion, she dropped her heavy ammo crate with a dull thud. Her weight shifted instantly into a perfect tactical stance. She didn't just hand him the rifle. She reached down, secured the weapon with a grip that was far too practiced for a logistics clerk, and stepped toward the gap in the line. The air in the valley went momentarily still, as if the world itself was holding its breath to see what the support girl would do with a weapon she was never supposed to touch. If you realize assumptions often shape how we approach situations, comment, "I was wrong." Elena didn't just pass the rifle. She understood the tactical void. She knew that if she simply handed the weapon to Miller, he would be overloaded, trying to manage two sectors at once with divided focus. The Delta Cross would still fail, and the team would be wiped out in the simulation. She stepped into the position Jax had vacated with the grace of a shadow. She didn't run with the clumsy haste of an amateur. She moved with a low, controlled glide that kept her center of gravity stable and her eyes on the horizon. She tucked the stock of the rifle into the pocket of her shoulder, her cheek resting against the cold metal, with a familiarity that made the senior instructors in the observation tower lean forward in their seats. The sun reflected off her steady gaze, showing a level of focus that belonged to a predator. "I've got the left sector, transitioning now," Elena shouted. Her voice wasn't high-pitched or panicked. It was a resonant, sharp command that cut through the noise of the simulated combat like a razor blade through silk. Miller froze for a split second, his hand still outstretched for the rifle she hadn't given him. He saw the way she was standing, knees bent, weight forward, elbows tucked. He saw the way her eyes were scanning the sector with predatory intent. He saw the safety click off with a movement so precise it looked mechanical. "Cross? What are you—" Miller started, his voice cracking. "Move, Sergeant. Bravo is entering the kill zone. Hold your angle," she interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. Miller, conditioned by 20 years of training to follow the clearest directive in a crisis, didn't argue. He turned back to his own sector, his trust shifting instinctively to the person holding the line, regardless of the uniform she wore or the crates she had been hauling. Elena engaged. She didn't just fire, she managed the position. She saw the mock targets appearing in the high grass, angles and distances that Miller hadn't even spotted yet. She took the shots with a surgical, rhythmic precision. 1, 2, 3. Every single target went down with a single hit marker on the electronic board. She wasn't overreacting. She wasn't spraying and praying into the smoke. She was maintaining the tactical cadence. She moved between the low wall and the crate, her high-low transitions as smooth and effortless as a veteran operator's. Every time she moved, she checked her corners. Every time she fired, she communicated her status. "Left clear, moving to support center." Inside the observation trailer, the training officers were staring at the thermal monitors in absolute silence. The telemetry data on the screens was showing a near-perfect efficiency rating for the Alpha left sector. "Who is that on the Alpha left flank?" the colonel asked, his voice low and dangerous. That's Agent Cross, sir. Logistics and supply," the technician replied, his voice trembling with disbelief. She's hitting 100% on the pop-up variables, and her movement metrics are T1 elite. Sir, she's outperforming the sergeant." On the field, the SEALs began to realize they weren't watching a lucky fluke or a burst of adrenaline. They were watching a masterclass in tactical recovery. Elena had stabilized the entire maneuver. By filling that one hole, the rest of the Alpha Squad's angles naturally corrected themselves as the pressure was relieved. The Bravo Squad was able to complete their extraction without a single casualty. The all-clear signal flashed green across every HUD in the valley. The simulation was over. Team Alpha had achieved a perfect score, and they had done it while their primary shooter was struggling on the ground. Elena didn't stay in the spotlight. The moment the signal went green, she engaged the safety, cleared the chamber with a crisp metallic clack, and placed the rifle back in Jax's trembling hands with a gentle but firm motion. She stepped back, her hands returning to her sides, her breathing as steady and rhythmic as if she had just finished a light afternoon walk. She walked back to her green ammo crate, picked it up with the same indifference as before, and began to log the expenditure of the rounds on her digital tablet. She returned to her support role as if the last 5 minutes of elite combat had never happened. The operators stood in the dust, their rifles hanging low, their eyes fixed on the ammo girl, who was now meticulously checking the serial numbers on the empty casings. The silence in the valley was heavy with the weight of shattered assumptions and bruised egos. They didn't see the bun and the olive shirt anymore. They saw the ghost of a warrior who had outperformed the best of them in a 3-minute window. Miller walked over to her slowly. His tactical vest was covered in dust, his face red from the exertion and the shame. He stopped 3 feet away, his expression a mixture of profound respect and deep, haunting confusion. Where did you learn to do that, Cross? Miller asked, his voice a low whisper. That wasn't logistics. That was Tier 1 marksmanship and field command. Elena looked up from her clipboard, her green eyes as calm and deep as a morning lake. Readiness isn't a job title, Sergeant. It's a habit you never allow yourself to lose. If you believe readiness is built long before the moment arrives, comment, I am indebted. The aftermath of the drill was quieter than any maneuver in recent memory. Usually the teams would be shouting, high-fiving, and bragging about their shots after a perfect run. But today, as they walked back to the debriefing area, there was a sense of profound reflection. The invisible support had saved the elite warriors, and the realization was a bitter but necessary pill to swallow. The sun began to dip behind the jagged peaks of the valley, casting long, dramatic shadows across the sand. The cooling air carried the scent of spent gunpowder and relief. Elena was busy helping Jax clear his jam weapon, her fingers moving with a mechanical grace that silenced the younger operator. He didn't look at her like a support girl anymore. He looked at her with the wide-eyed awe of a student standing before a master. Miller sat on the bumper of the supply truck, his eyes fixed on Elena as she loaded the last of the crates with the same quiet strength she had shown all day. He realized that he had spent the last month calling her logistics and the ammo girl with a smirk. He had treated her like a servant to his own ego, and she had saved his reputation and his team without a single word of complaint or a request for credit. You've done that before? Miller asked, stepping closer to the truck, his voice now devoid of any arrogance. Elena stopped, a small, tired smile touching her lips for the first time. Yes. Where? Miller pressed. The Corps? Special Ops? I've seen the best in the world, Elena, and I've never seen a transition that smooth or a sight picture that clear. Elena took a breath, the scent of the evening air finally cooling the valley. Experience comes in many forms, Sergeant, she replied simply. Sometimes you're the one in the spotlight holding the rifle, and sometimes you're the one making sure the spotlight has enough power to stay on while everyone else is sleeping. Today, I was the latter, but I never allowed myself to forget how to do the former. A senior instructor walked over, a man who had seen 40 years of combat. He gave a sharp, respectful nod to Elena. Good work today, Cross. The colonel wants to see your service jacket updated by morning. He said he hasn't seen a Delta Cross saved with that much precision in over 10 years. You made us all look like amateurs. The other SEALs gathered around, no longer joking about staying behind or just passing ammo. They looked at her with the gravity she had earned in the dirt. One of the younger operators, Jax, who had been the one to slip, stepped forward and gave Elena a sharp, formal military salute. Thank you, Elena, Jax said, his voice sincere and heavy with emotion. You changed the whole flow of that drill. I was sure we were done for. I won't forget what you did. We're a team, Jax, she replied quietly, acknowledging the salute with a simple nod. My job is to make sure you succeed, whatever that takes, whether it's passing a crate or holding the line. The story of the Raven, the call sign she had once carried in a different life, began to whisper through the base that night. They learned that Elena wasn't just a logistics clerk. She was a survivor of the forward engagement teams, a woman who had managed tactical grids in zones that technically didn't exist on any map. As the sun began to set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of deep purple and gold, the energy on the base was fundamentally different. Elena was still the one handling the crates, still the one in the gray shirt, but the way people spoke to her was now filled with a quiet reverence. They didn't bark orders anymore. They asked for her opinion on the next drill's layout. They didn't ignore her. They stepped aside to let her pass as if she were a 4-star general. She had turned the fight around without needing a medal, a speech, or a title. She had proven that true skill doesn't need to be announced with a trumpet. It just needs to be ready when the world stops making sense. Elena walked back to the barracks that evening, the weight of the day finally starting to settle in her weary bones. She was still just Elena Cross, a woman who preferred the quiet work of the Foundation. But she knew that in that valley, the story of the ammo girl would be told for years to come. Not as a joke, but as a reminder that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you choose not to notice. If you believe real skill shows under pressure, comment, "I will live kindly." The story of Elena Cross reminds us that a person's current role, uniform, or job description is rarely the full story of their life. We live in a world that is obsessively focused on labels: support, leader, expert, amateur, and we use those shallow labels to build walls around our expectations of others. We think that because someone is doing a small job, they must have a small background. We think that because someone is quiet, they are unsure of themselves. We think that because someone is in a support role, they lack the cold, hard skills of a warrior. But true mastery is often found in the places no one bothers to look. But true strength is a quiet, internal thing. It doesn't need to roar to be powerful. It doesn't need a specific title or a shiny badge to exist. It lives in the years of preparation, in the discipline of the shadows, and in the character of the person when no one is watching and there is no applause to be had. It is the silent strength that holds the front lines together when the anchors break. Elena didn't need the SEAL's approval to know her own worth. Her value was settled long before she ever picked up a green ammo crate. She was perfectly content to be the invisible support because she knew that her actions would always speak 1,000 times louder than her resume ever could. She understood that to serve is to lead from the bottom up. The elite warriors learned a vital, humbling lesson that day. Respect is a debt you owe to everyone you meet until they personally prove otherwise. They learned that the person they think is the weakest link in the room might actually be the one holding the entire structure together with their silent competence and their refusal to quit. We should all strive to be a little more like Elena Cross, to be the silent professional in our own lives, to build our skills in the dark, to observe far more than we talk, and to be ready to act with absolute precision when the gap finally opens and the world screams for help. You don't need a microphone to be heard. You don't need a spotlight to lead. You only need the clarity to see the truth and the courage to step in quietly and fix the rhythm when everything else is falling apart around you. True leadership is helping others find their way back to their own strength. It's providing the ammo for the mission and the rifle for the moment of crisis. It is being the foundation so others can build their success upon your work. The next time you see someone who looks ordinary, someone who is working quietly in the corner while others are bragging, don't assume you know their story or their limits, because they might just be carrying a history that would stun you to your core, and they might just be the only reason the world keeps spinning while you sleep in safety. Real strength is quiet, real leadership is clear, and real heroes don't care if you know their names. They only care that the mission is complete and the team gets home safe. Be the foundation, be the support, and be ready when the command echoes through the smoke. Hand me that rifle. Because in the end, it's not what you tell the world you are that matters. It's what you do when the world stops making sense and only the truth remains. Elena Cross didn't need the spotlight because she was the one who made sure the spotlight never went out. And in her silence, she remains the most powerful force on the field. If you believe the people who step up in the exact moment they're needed deserve recognition, leave a comment below. And if this story reminds you that true capability is revealed in seconds, don't forget to subscribe for more.